Hi, I'm Suki. Welcome to Getting Psychic, where you can listen to me use myself to test the theory that anyone can get psychic. Hello, welcome. Today I welcome Phyllis Anne Douglas, the voice of an angel, an invocational vocal artist and mediumistic seer who channels transformative, multidimensional music and wisdom. Known for her profound ability to connect with higher consciousness and facilitate deep spiritual healing, Phyllis uses her unique vocal and energetic transmissions to align and elevate individual frequencies, unlocking transformative potential and guiding clients towards their soul's true path. Welcome, Phyllis.
Thank you. Thank you.
What that's a pretty cool introduction. Now we have to figure out what all of that means. So I was scouring your website last night to try to have an understanding of what it is that you do. And I think that I want to first ask you and establish who Elohim is.
Well, for me, Elohim is a collective. And biblically speaking, when they talk about the word Elohim, it is plural, right?
Yeah.
So for me, Elohim is a collective. And the way that they explain it as if you have a hierarchy, there's an umbrella on top, right? And on the top, you have God's source, right? And then underneath that, you have the archangels, angels, and then it's the architects. And I know these as essentially the messengers and the avatars and so forth of God, because God does not have a form, right? And so when I'm speaking to Elohim, just as anything else, it is a conversation or a communication with God, as well as being transmitted through these beings. So typically, it is the angels or archangels that I am communicating with.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Elohim is actually the Hebrew word for God.
Yeah, you'll hear all different types of things. They say it's a Hebrew word for God, and mistranslations and stating that the word Elohim is actually plural, as in gods from earlier religious or biblical writings. And the truth of the matter is that God source is energy, rarely takes a form in that sense, if ever, right? And so we can communicate directly with God, but God does not have a physical body. And so in that sense, then the angels are the messengers and the doers for God's will, right?
Yes. Okay.
And so we're always speaking with God, right? We're speaking and communicating with God, but those that answer are often the angels then, right?
I see. Okay, cool. So can you describe your psychic capabilities? Like, do you just have all the clairs?
I have all the clairs. Yeah, it's really dependent upon the situations or circumstance I find myself in and what it is that I am doing. It's all available to me in that moment in time if it is a necessary skill or tool that is needed for, whatever it is that I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. So will you take us back to your earliest experiences with the non-physical reality?
That's funny. So I remember being born.
Whoa.
Right before I was born, I was in a space and I was, I was speaking to heavenly beings, and they were basically congratulating me for saying yes to actually coming into this physical life with this mission that I have to do what it is that I'm doing. And I remember that very clearly. And then there was a bright spark of light. That's all I could. And I felt myself squeezed down the vaginal canal. And I popped out. So it was interesting because somewhere in between, like the spark of light, I remember almost a feeling of draining memory.
Wow.
And then later it came, the not that the understanding of that came back later, like the memory, the clear memory of it came back later in life. But as far as, psychic abilities and so forth, I recognized it about the age of 4. I've always been surrounded by angels. They have served as my guides and my teachers, my protectors, my guardians. So they're always with me. And they provided me with a number of different experiences as I was growing up with both physical and non-physical beings. But I remember being, a little girl and speaking with what others thought was an imaginary friend, and it was angels. I didn't know that they were angels until I started Sunday school. And I remember,
Wow.
we received our little Bible, and I was enamored with the what they called photo plates in there, these like bright, colorful photos. And so I was leafing through, and I saw this beautiful image there with this angel and robes and wings, and that's how they first presented themselves to me. And I went, "Oh, they're angels!" I was like so excited. uh, because then I understood them to be angels, and I've always trusted them. I had never had any fear. They have never told me an untruth. And so that's the relationship that we've had and that we've really needed to have, because with the work that I do, there needs to be a trust. You need to hold faith, but without being able to hold faith, you have to have trust. And it's not just trust in self, but it's also trust in those non physical beings with which you're communicating and working with. But through my childhood, I had all of these. If you've ever watched the paranormal movies, I've had many of those experiences. I remember, beings kind of coming in and sitting on my bed or pulling the blankets. Or I had this gentleman that visited me for a period of, oh gosh, 3 or 4 years, like clockwork. And he'd walk from the corner of my room. He had a top hat on, and he would sit on the end of my bed and just stare at me. And I would be there with the covers
Oh my God.
and I would stare at him. And so he came for quite an extended period. And I knew him to be very kind. I didn't know who he was or why he was there. And then suddenly he stopped. And in later years, after my parents had both passed away and we were having an estate sale, we were, my sister and I were, looking through everything, and we saw these old photo albums. And I opened it up, and lo and behold, here is the man in the top hat and everything that had visited me for years. And it had turned out that he had passed away like long before I was born. So, I had situations like that. I had situations out of the paranormal movies, as I stated, but the angels would never allow it to go too far where I would be injured or traumatized, over
Yeah,
traumatized.
over traumatized.
And
Wow.
I mean, like the key thing I remember once I was woken up by something grabbing my ankle, and it was pulling me off the end of the bed. And I remember kind of feeling like I was within that, half sleep, half awake state. And I'm kind of clawing my way up the bed. And they had that old lamp with a little pull string. And I just dove and I yanked it, and the light came on and it stopped. And when I opened up my eyes, the top mattress was halfway off the bed. The blankets were strewn. And when I looked at my ankle, I had fingerprints, compression marks, fingerprints
Oh my God.
on there. And that kind of flipped me out a little bit. And at that time, it was really interesting because it was just a known factor. The angels were with me, and I didn't have conversations with them at that time like I do now. But there was some type of energetic communication
Mhm.
where I always felt like I had a savior, or I always felt like someone had saved me from something, right? And it was always the angels there. And I asked later years, like, well, why on earth did I have to have those experiences? Because prior, what they said was, because you need to know what truly exists and what does not, right? And you need to know without a shadow of a doubt, so that when you work with people that come to you that have these specific situations and so forth, you are familiar, and that you can shift vibrationally beyond that circumstance so that you can then assist them in whatever it is that they're going through. I didn't really like that answer, but it is what it is.
Wow.
Uh, but I remember later when the paranormal movies were coming out, I was told to watch them.
By the angels?
Yeah, the angels told me to watch the paranormal movies. And it was interesting because as I'm watching certain things that were happening to people in the movie, I remembered similar situations happening to myself. And it was kind of just bringing those things forward, even things that I had forgotten, right?
Wow.
So that was essentially my childhood. And when I was 15, my grandmother passed away. And she came to me. I remember it was 10:30 at night, and she came to me to state that she was making her transition from physical life. And she said, I remember she said, "I love you," but she said, "I need to tell you something." She said, "You are a seer. And I am a seer as well, but I did not know." But she understood I knew things were going on, and I was, I was within that state of awareness where I truly needed to know that, right? And so the understanding then that I was a seer, even though I didn't quite, not fully understand what a seer was, a part of me did. And I felt this just overlying relief that, oh, and it took me a long time during my childhood to understand that other people did not have these experiences. And so I didn't talk about any of them till I was about 15 years old. And I remember that day I came home from school and my dad was home early from work, and I asked why he was there, and he said, "Well, I'm so sorry to tell you my mother passed away." And I went, "Oh, I know. She came to me last night to say goodbye." My father didn't speak to me for 2 days. And I think he was just kind of like stunned or shocked. It was interesting.
Wow.
The only other thing I remember when I was a child, I had double pneumonia and I almost died when I was 9 years old.
Oh, gosh.
And I remember being in a state of true suffering. And I left my body, and I distinctly remember floating through the room and down the stairs and hovering above the kitchen table when my parents were having a discussion that they thought I was getting worse and I really needed to go to the hospital. And so I heard them coming upstairs, and I'm following them up, and and I
Wow.
dived back into my body, and I just said, "Are you taking me to the hospital now?" And I just remember it kind of shook them a little bit. Well, yes. How did you know? but so yeah, just, and interesting things like that happen during my childhood. And kind of after that, I realized that energetically, because I'm an empath as well, energetically at that time, I have the ability to hold a great deal of energy, and I was holding energy for my mother,
Yeah.
who had had challenges as well. And, she had cancer 3 times and all of this. And I was holding her. I was carrying her energy. And frankly, then I was worn out. And I hadn't realized that until later, when you start that multi-level clearing through it. And so when I left for college, I just kind of like, I don't know, I kind of pushed it down, but it didn't really go away
Yeah.
because kind of interesting things happen. And I think in grad school, it started to really come back. I had certain circumstances when I had challenges in life or something, like I could sense my grandmother came swooping in because I could smell lilacs, and lilac was her favorite flower, and I could sense because I can feel in my body when something or someone is near, energetically speaking. And so there were circumstances like that, but they taught me different things. And one of the two key things. So one of the key things was in grad school, there were these 2 long flights of cement steps. And I was going down to visit a friend, and I took that first step, and it was a misstep. I started to fall, and I just remember like whoosh, this blue sparkly light, and the next step was 2 levels down, it was at the bottom. And I just went, and the light went and went away. And I just turned quickly and looked behind me and I just screamed, "Thank you." And I ran into the building. I know, I was just like, it's kind of scared me to death. And I was like, wow, this stuff is real. I
Yeah.
don't know. Because everything that happened to me, there was still that niggling little thing that said, this can't be real. But if
Yeah.
it's not real, I'm crazy. Put me in a straitjacket, lock me away.
Yeah.
And so at a certain point, when things are happening and occurring, you've got to realize that something's up, right?
Yeah.
That this is real. I'm not crazy. And just later in life, that is my mission. I started to awaken to, the work that I'm doing. It started to evolve. I was told what my mission was. I had the full memory of why I'm here and all of that. And really, the work truly, truly started after all these years, like this year.
Wow.
And this is like the pinnacle point when everything kind of came together, because it's been many years of refinement, right? And I've been through, oh gosh, every significant energetic healing training and all of that as well,
Mhm.
because I was quite the seeker,
Yeah.
because I didn't have the support. And so part of me was out trying to find it. And so I did a lot of energetic healing courses and classes and certifications and all of this, and all of that just began to fall away when my own abilities just began to awaken and unfold and evolve. And it was truly the understanding that, we take all of these courses and trainings and so forth, but really the way that they serve us is to create a doorway, or they're like a key to open us up to the truth of who it is that we are and what it is, our own magic and medicine that we have brought into the world. It helps us to awaken to that. And so all of that, everything that I had learned in the past, as I stated, like fell away and began to reveal, truly who it is that I am, what it is I'm here to do, and the tools and the resources that I was given in order to accomplish that.
That's so beautiful. I think we can end the podcast now. Okay. So here's a question that I have about angels. You're a little girl and you're not telling anyone about your wild psychic experiences. So you're
Mm.
just having that privately. Now you go to Sunday school and you see what you understand to be your friends that you've been talking to. Now, at that time, was that like a confirmation of Christianity to you? And how did that end up going? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, well, if this is the only place where my buddies exist, that must mean it's real. Or how did that play out for you?
Well, that's interesting because I was raised in a church. I was raised Methodist.
Mhm.
My mother was Baptist and Pentecostal at the time, and she converted to become Methodist. And so I went to church. I went to Sunday school and all of that. But the interesting thing was, I don't even know how to say this really. I don't know. I believe in God,
Yeah.
and my idea of Christianity is not as self-serving as a religious institution makes it out to be, right? So so I got kicked out of Sunday school.
Oh,
Not
you got
long after that.
so you got kicked out right away. Okay.
No, I got kicked out. Well, it was a while. It was about a year after that. I think I was 6, yeah, when I got kicked out. Um, I didn't believe what they were telling me because I knew something else to be true. And even
Wow.
though I couldn't really eloquently state what that knowledge was that resided within me, like
Yeah.
what it was. I knew it wasn't that.
Wow.
And so, I did feel validate. It wasn't validation. It wasn't really confirmation either. And even at 4, I didn't need that. It was just a higher understanding of, oh, they're angels, and that excited me because then I could state they are angels, right? I knew that. And so for me, I wanted to know, well, what are angels? Why are they in the Bible and all of that, right?
Yeah.
I knew them to be messengers of God, and that they flew in and they were good Samaritans and they helped people in their need, and then all of that. And I was thinking silently, they do a whole lot more than that, right? At least in my life, they do.
Yeah.
Um, but but I would ask these questions that the teacher at the time had difficulty answering, or it was not in alignment with her beliefs, because she had these staunch beliefs where you have like blinders on, and it's black or it's white, right? And there's nothing in between. And so I would always state, when in the Bible readings and stuff, it's like, be good or you're gonna, God's gonna get you type of thing. And I was like, no, he's not. Right? I would just be like, that's not true.
Oh, I love it.
And I would state that. They would state stuff or read stuff, and I say, but that's not true.
Yeah, he doesn't judge us. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. At me, I think that age is like, God's not going to spank me, or
That
God's
is
not going to like kill me. I
so
mean,
cute.
it was just like, and it was age appropriate.
Yeah.
But still,
Wow.
I had the recognition that I'm not going to hell,
Yeah. Well,
because I do
that's
something
cool.
bad. Right. But I asked these difficult questions, and then they talked to my mother and said that I was basically a rabble rouser. I was a rebel. I don't know.
Yeah, I love it.
But they
so
told
fun.
me that I didn't fit into Sunday school,
Yeah, totally.
and so I went to Big People's Church for a time, and I was happy
That's awesome.
at that time. Yeah.
I want to know a little bit more about angels. Are angels a race? Or what's up
They're
with
not a
angels?
race. Angels are a created being.
Okay.
Right? They were created by God to do God's will. They're God's messengers, and they do things for God, essentially. Right?
Mm-hmm.
They are put to task. They have specific missions, or um, they have specific things that they do, especially like the archangels. And there are hundreds and hundreds of, probably thousands of angels, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many angels there are, but there's a lot. And so they are created beings that are in service to God source.
Okay, cool. And then how does an angel, is it like a hierarchy? Are archangels, were they once regular angels?
No, they were created as, there are they're the higher archangels that you would have, are typically Archangel Michael,
Yep.
Gabriel, Raphael, and so forth, right? And they have specific tasks closer to God, and then you have all of the other angels, right? And so the archangels can sometimes put to task other angelic groups
Mm-hmm.
and so forth, to do whatever it is, to help out with whatever needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's simplistically stating
Yeah.
stating it, but
Yeah.
that's pretty much it.
You mentioned grad school. How did your career path go? Because it seems to be that now your whole life is spiritually oriented, helping people, healing people, teaching people. What did you do before?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I have always been associated with the arts, and what I realized early on, I was a dancer. And finally, after a couple of failed majors, I chose, I had my undergrad in education with a minor in dance, and then my MFA is in dance and production. I realized, and I danced, in companies and so forth, and did that whole thing for many years. And I had my own company for 17 years. But what
Wow.
I found was, when I was dancing, I think it was really a survival mechanism for me, especially when I was younger, because I could step outside of myself. And I realized that later on, that I don't have to be me, I can be something else, and I can express what's going on within me, right? Um, and so I always felt good, like, okay. It kind of regulated my nervous system, and just helped me through what were turbulent times in my life to be able to do that. It was a form of release, yeah, for both my mind and my body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Moving tons of energy too. It's cool.
Yeah, and then I owned a Pilates and yoga studio for many years as well, and sold that. And I was an artist. I loved to draw and paint. I still do. I was a music major, a violin and voice for a brief period of time. Um, so I've always kind of done something artistic.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I think that's why I studied different forms of shamanism as I got older. And the one that I really stuck with since 2007 at the time, but then I don't really practice it, but I follow the tenets of it. And that is Toltec shamanism. Because the key aspect of Toltec shamanism is simply to live your life as a work of art.
Beautiful.
And that's what I do. I really look at creating my life as a work of art and try to do that with every aspect of my life.
That's honestly thrilling to hear that. So you were not classically trained at singing.
I was.
Okay.
I was a music major,
Okay.
briefly, because I was violin and voice.
Okay.
But only I maybe studied in college. It was about a year before I changed my major. I did take voice lessons a little bit somewhere along the line. In truth, the opening of my voice and the ability of my voice is God-given. So it didn't really come from, having trained it like professionally. But I have always sung. And I remembered actually speaking. My parents always thought, oh, she just a made up language, gobbledygook, right? But I was speaking light language to the angels when I was a little girl.
Oh my God.
And had forgotten about that really until they reminded me. And I stopped doing it when I got older, and then just picked it up, again later when I had the memory. I think one of the key things that happened to me to bring forward my light language and the remembrance again, just the true acknowledgement of my own divinity, was a friend invited me up to Mount Shasta. And I went up there to take a course. It was something similar to Reiki, but not, I think she called it Shambhala Reiki.
Okay.
And I'm like, all right. There was supposed to be 7 people present. And it turned out it was only the 2 of us. And from other things that have happened in my life, I knew that because it was myself and one other person, something was going to happen. And I just had that, like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen the entire time? So we're in the course, and she said, well, I'm being guided to open your halos. That's a gift that I've been given. And I don't know why I don't usually do that, but since it's just the 2 of you, I'm going to go ahead and open up your halos. And so I was like, sure. So I was the first one on the table. She touched me and I was gone. And I was back up in the room. I remember before I was being born or being born. And I was like talking to them. And they were talking, you're doing a good job, and now we're going to bring you fully online. It was just kind of like we were talking, but I didn't realize we're talking in light language. We're talking English, right? And so I remember I'm like shaking, right? I'm going, what is going on? And finally, I woke up. Well, she had been trying to bring me back for about 20 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
And she's like, oh my goodness, I have been trying to bring you back. And so I spoke in light language, like fluent light language. And I could hear English in my head. I could see, it sounds weird, but I could see English in my head as I spoke light language. And I could not speak English for 7.5 to 8 hours. And I was like, okay, God, you just don't understand. I cannot come home to my husband speaking like this. Yeah. And
oh my God.
Yeah, so we were just kind of sitting there, and I was drawing or doing something, and then we're in a hotel room. And I kept, before that, I'm pointing at the menu to my throat like I've got laryngitis or something, because it was weird. And I was at the table and I was speaking to my friend in light language and writing down little notes. It was the most interesting experience. And then she asked me a question, and I turned and answered, and it was in English. And I thought, oh, thank God.
and I'm back.
I'm back. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's when that really started, because it opened me back up.
Okay, so for our listeners, will you just quickly explain what light language is?
The easiest thing is that it is a frequency-based language that transcends all boundaries because it is undefinable by the mind, right? So it is just frequency, energy, and the meaning resides within it on a soul level. So your soul understands it, right? Because that is a language that your soul speaks, right? It's a frequency-based language. And so there aren't defining words. Like you would have words in our dictionary have a specific meaning, right? It is more the full context of an experience or whatever it is all at once,
Okay.
right? And so, I've done this thing where I'll speak, I'll say, I love you in light language. And, it's like 3 words if you say, I love you. And then it's this whole monologue if you say, in light language. But that's basically what light language is. Now, there's different levels of light language because, honestly speaking, when you can connect to another another form in existence, you can pick up on light language. You can pick up on the energy and you can translate it into a language. So I could speak with a tree. I can connect and speak light language to a tree and understand that. But you can do the same with a door. You can do the same with more, let's call it darker or negative energy, as well, right? Because everything is energy. So it is a discernment as to what connection it is that you're making, right? Now, I speak the highest available heavenly signatures of sacred design, right? And free heavenly signatures, frequency and sacred design is what they call it, or what is the word they use? The sacred design and creation. Okay, so if you think biblically speaking, and then there was sound, that's the heavenly signature that I'm speaking of. It is a creational signature. So when I speak, when I do the work that I'm doing, I can feel this surge of like the electromagnetic or energy that comes from the earth to that grounds me, it roots me, and then I feel this electric energy that comes through when I speak. And through my voice and through the frequency, I see sacred geometric structures of creation, right? So when I open to that, and if I'm looking at a person or people, I can see all of these constructs, what I call, sacred geometric constructs around them that make up who it is that they are.
Yeah.
We have similar aspects and then we have dissimilar aspects because we are individuated in that sense. And so when I'm singing, I'm speaking to the being, but I'm also speaking of the sacred geometry because I can manipulate that through the frequencies of my voice. And that's how I can create change or to transform things, right? Or to create balance or what have you.
Wow. Okay, so when did vocalizing enter into your work?
Well, I've always sung.
In
It
healing?
might have been around 2011 or a little after that I was doing some energetic healing work with someone, and an angel came in and said, "You are now going to begin to sing to your clients." And so I remember leaning down and whispering in her ear at the time, and I said, "Apparently, I'm going to sing." And she went, "Okay." Whatever. So I started to sing. And I just remember the energy expanded like in throughout the entire it created like an atmosphere in the space. And it sounds strange, but it was like the intensification of the vocal expression intensified the energy that was like coming from my hands. It was like this thing. And so I did the session and my voice changed when I was doing specific things with her body. And I've always learned, I have no fear in that sense because I have such deep trust. And so for me, it was just like, this is interesting. And I didn't try to decipher it too much. I just let it
Yeah.
come through at the time. And my client was like, I don't know what it was I just experienced, but wow. And I was like, okay, but that's just another level
Yeah.
of who Phyllis is and what Phyllis does, right? And
I
so,
guess I do this now.
yeah, so from that point, it kind of began to unfold more and more to what it is today.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay. So are your vocals and your light language, would you consider those to be channeled?
It's interesting because yes and no. Yes, earlier, no, not now.
Mhm.
So earlier in our work, we always consider ourselves to be separate. A lot of people consider themselves to be separate of God,
Mm.
but we are all things all at once. And so for me, originally, it would have been, I'm channeling because I'd like hear it in my head and then it would just express out, right? Or I would state it. And that's not the case because I've become fully embodied now. So what that happens is it comes in and it flows through, as and through me. So I become it. And so with the embodiment of that, one, it's a higher level of expression. Two, there's so many more, I don't know what to call them, gifts, that abilities, let's call it that are mine, but I wasn't actually utilizing. But with that came the evolution of all of these abilities, right? In when doing the work. And it's a totally different experience to become that. Because when you're experiencing, you're witnessing at the same time, right? And you're receiving whatever it is that's going out as well. So when I'm doing the work, I'm feeling like I am all things. And the more I do it, the more that's happening. And it can be freaky sometimes, depending if I'm doing like a long transmission and I'm in that, I feel disembodied almost. I feel like my physical body just kind of fades away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So recently, I was in Mount Shasta with a group of 7 girlfriends, and you dialed in on Zoom and did a transmission for us. Can you describe what was happening?
Not really fully. So here's what I'm going to say about that. When we do any form of healing work, when we really do any form of spiritual work for the benefit of another, a group or a place, right? What I have learned in the refinement of my work is that I, Phyllis, have no place in what it is that I'm doing, right? So when I learned not to, to be able to separate myself from any outcome, to not have any specific intention that such and such is going to occur, when I stop the questioning about what is happening, that liberates you to be able to do the work at a level in which it needs to be done and fully accepted by the person, the place, the people that are receiving, because it's up to them. We as healers do not heal someone. We facilitate, or we serve as a catalyst, or we create an opening, right? That allows them to heal themselves.
My experience was we're sitting in a room and you're basically singing a beautiful, mysterious opera to us, and we're all meditating. But then at the end, you suggested that we take it and re listen to it. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the sound vibration and frequency of your vocalizations is healing, right?
Right.
So we made our plan, and a couple days later, we went and we played it in the woods next to a
Hmm.
stream. And it was equally as amazing and completely different. I was like, "Oh, I don't remember I don't remember it going like that." And it seemed to just fly by, and then, of course, those of us who are very clairvoyant were just like, "Okay,
Mhm.
uh, all the Lumerians were here. This happened. Da, 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 da," like all of this activity was happening.
Oh, you mentioned that, and I do remember, before I did start the transmission, that the Lemurians came in. I do remember that, but I remember they came. I have for a group of Lemurian elders that I work with, but I did see the Lemurians within your space as well. So they did come in, and so part of, as I stated, the angels are like they're my like say Elohim as a whole is they're my guardians as well. They're kind of like a gatekeeper if you think about that. So they will just allow certain things to come in, but they will allow certain things to come in. I think, right? If it is in alignment, right? Because remember, we're all things. So I do remember that there was a message. There was something with the Lemurians in there too, because it's just like a beautiful symphony of voices, and the voices can be added in from many different places and spaces dependent upon what it is that I'm doing and who it is that I'm doing it for.
Mhm,
And so the sounds that come through, they can be healing, they can be transformative, they they can create balance, they can transmute energies. They basically do or are designed to do whatever it is that is needed to be done by the person or for the person or the group, that I'm working with.
mhm,
And there can be a theme too. If there's something that you really, a group really wants to experience, then that will be in the mix as well.
mhm.
But also I know that during the initial transmission, I vaguely remember them stating something about minds, and they need to play this again somewhere else. Because sometimes you're sitting there and you're thinking about what it is that you're hearing, and like, oh wow, what's it doing? Whatever. That we become preoccupied or a little bit distracted. And so they are prescriptive in nature so that you can take them out. So if you're in a different space, you have different energies, you have different surroundings that I feel really kind of join into the dance with the sound, right? And so it can differ if you're in a different location when you're listening to it.
Yeah. It was really cool. And since then, it's Lumerians have been all over the place. Like, I actually happened to have a reading yesterday, and the woman said, do you by chance ever work with the Lumerians?" And I was like, "Well, they're just kind of like all over all of us right now, which is really
Mhm.
interesting."
Beautiful.
Would you take a moment to describe who they are?
The Lemurians?
Yeah.
What makes you think I know? Well, for me, what it is that I understand, and also I can acknowledge that I was living a life in Lemuria because they've called on me a couple of times to do some things where I shift out of the physical body and my etheric body is doing certain things. And I don't remember offhand at this moment what it is that I did, but I was higher up, and I was actually part of the destruction of Lemuria. Atlanta, so sorry, not Lemuria, and so I worked with the crystals and the frequency and so forth, which kind of fits in my life today.
Yeah.
Uh, but for me, the Lemurians were a civilization here on Earth that was not from Earth originally, right? And so when I see them, they're in a humanistic type of body, but they don't necessarily facial structure, they don't necessarily look human. But when I look at the elders, and it depends on how they appear, because sometimes they appear like that. with kind of an elongated face, and then sometimes they appear more human.
Hmm.
Um, so it's really kind of interesting. Uh, but that's really all I know. They were an advanced civilization
Hmm.
that I was a part of in a past life. And it was really about wanting to leaning into spiritual awakening and ascension and all, just kind of like we are right now. Like the challenges, right? And but they're still here they're here helping us to lean in to that, because we need to awaken. We need to ascend within this physical form.
Yeah.
And so they're helping us in regards to that.
Yeah. I was just having that thought, like, how interesting that they seem actually invested in helping us. And I was wondering why. But
Well, they're beautiful beings, and so they stand in love, and we're all one,
yeah,
right?
right, exactly.
And so it's like humanity, it's kind of like I have this sense of all of these beings and civilizations staring down upon Earth saying, wake up, time to wake up,
Yeah.
because we need to ascend, because they need us to ascend so that we can all ascend together. And so it's really like all of these higher civilizations and so forth that have already reached that process level of awakening are waiting for us. And so we have all these groups that are trying to help humanity to rise up,
Yeah.
right?
It's
And to make
incredible.
to make that final shift. And then that's really basically why, they're helping us.
Yeah. Okay, so on that note, what do you think interdimensional beings or ETs have to teach us as a society?
What do they have to teach us?
Or what could we learn from them that's important?
Hmm. Well, it's interesting that many of these beings have come to Earth to
Hmm.
help us with technology and so forth, to arise in technology and everything, but um, and to also, well, not just technology, but just understanding, bringing in higher intelligence in to every aspect of our life. But in a sense, they can teach us certain things about awakening, about how we should be, right? And teaching us ways to access that. But they can't give us something that we don't already have. So it's really about, awakening, and what I call in my other work is the Christing. The Christing comes from within us, right? There's not like a second coming of Christ, like this being's going to
Hmm.
come in and save us. It's the Christ coming through us. It is our awakening process. It's our Christing to the understanding that we are divine beings, right? We are the God force in action, in physical form. And so that's the understanding, that's the awakening process. And so, my understanding of communicating with different galactics is that they're trying to give us the tools and the resources we need to help us to awaken
Hmm.
to the truth of who we
Yeah.
are. And they can't do it, nobody can do it for us.
Right. Okay, so now we need to talk about does it make sense to call this work channeled tools, like your Lumerian healing rod?
The word that they use now is conduit. Yeah. So I'm a conduit for the consciousness of Elohim. And so Elohim had come to me and said, we want you to start making sacred artifacts. And I said, okay, what is a sacred artifact? Right. The first one, and this was kind of interesting, because I'd received all this information about creating, and I remember the Lemurians came in. It was like of creating the Lemurian healing rod. And I'd gotten some information, and they weren't like the rods that they are. They were round. They were one of the to bring forward the Lemurian healing disc is what it was. And the day after I had that vision, that dream, uh, a, a gentleman called me. I had taken a course from him years ago when he had come into the United States. It was regenerative healing, I think it was called. And he called me and said, I had this information, I don't know if it was meditation or a dream, to connect with you to make this Lemurian thing. I was just like, okay, well, I got that message too, right? And so we were talking, and I said, what are you going to use it for? What do you see? And so that's how it became the rod. They said that they would make it a more contemporary version that we could utilize and carry with ease. And so that's how the Lemurian healing rod came to be. And so they gave me the information, the schematics. They told me to Google this and that and learn how to do copper etching and all of that, right? And so that's how it came to be. And then after I started with the Lemurian healing rods, and then it was the celestial power chambers, and then it was the pathway receptor rods, and then it was individual items that I create, like one of a kind items that I create. Like I'm working on a staff right now. And I was like, well, I want to create some other items too.
Yeah.
So, because otherwise I'll get bored. And so I do create like other things as well that periodically show up on my Etsy shop. But those are my key things, and they are to assist humanity in their process of awakening and of connecting to the higher forces and sources. And I also, when that came about, they said, well, we want you to create a group. And so I have the Lemurian Healing Rod Practitioner group that's on Facebook. And so with that, the more healing rods that I sold, they said, there's a grid that's forming that was there from, the early ancient Lemurian society. There was like a healing grid. And there are like the Lemurian discs and other things, the energy of that. And so every time someone purchases a Lemurian healing rod, it connects to the grid in the location that they are. So I am creating like an umbrella over the world. That's the way I envision it. So when you're using a Lemurian healing rod, they actually downloaded me with a whole bunch of information that I created like a workshop, and you can purchase the workshop as a course on how to utilize the different tools together. But when you use the Lemurian healing rod, you can just intend to connect to all of the other Lemurian healing healing rods in existence. And that includes the ancient Lemurian healing discs as well.
Yeah, it is really interesting because yesterday when I was getting that reading that I mentioned, they said, get to work with that rod. They were like, yeah, you're enjoying using it and meditating with yourself, but you're going to freak out when you use it in healing work. They were like, go.
All of my sacred artifacts have they're conscious, right? And so they're with you for a lifetime. Nobody else can utilize them. And if you die, then that consciousness is freed as well. So you're helping to elevate the consciousness that's come to work with you through the tool. And so the interesting thing, as you began to work with it, I would sleep with mine. I would just hold it. And it was funny because I would hold it. I wouldn't like let it go in my sleep. It was like working with me, doing something right when I was sleeping. And I do the same with the pathway receptor rods. And it's funny because I'll just feel myself all the way. It'll wake me up because I'm putting them away because it's like, you're done. But I just remember watching it move or jump. I was working with it. I can't remember what I was doing, but I was working with the Lemurian healing rod. I had it in my hand, and it literally like jumped 3 times. Like, I mean, jumped in my hand. I was like, what? And it was like literally jumping in my hand. And so I was like, well, what's happening? Well, they're talking about, energy accumulates in there and then it's just bursts through it, and they're explaining all of this. And I'm like, okay, I would have to explain one thing. When I didn't really believe in them initially. And this is me. I was just like, I'm not skeptical, but I still do these fantastical things. And I'm like, what the heck? This just can't be real.
I feel you.
I just, And so I'm creating this thing and these things are happening and I'm like and people are and I'm like, I didn't even create one for myself first. This is the weirdest thing. I did not create one for myself. And people, I was getting these testimonials about how fantastic this thing was and everything that they were doing with it and that the energy was immense and, all of this stuff. And I'm like,
Maybe there's something to this.
So maybe there's something. And so finally, I remember hearing, maybe it's about time that you created this for yourself. So I created one for myself. I created one of everything, for myself. But I started to work with the Lemurian healing rod, and they wanted me to work with it because I'm bringing forward not just the tools, but there's a whole methodology, right? It's a technology that's associated with the tools, and I'm bringing that in as well. And I couldn't do that if I wasn't actually working with the tools. But it took me over a year of creating all these tools, and I sell many of them. My business does really well, and I just, it's always just like this thing, right? Like, so I keep expressing gratitude and I'm still just like, oh my God, I don't understand how I came to be able to do this,
It's
why I'm doing
crazy.
it. And people say, how do you activate them? I really couldn't tell you other than I created, like, through their guidance, a ritual, and it's Elohim that activates them. It's like a 3 to 14-day process, depending on what it is I've created. But they activate it, and the consciousness comes in, right? And I still to this day have a challenge wrapping my head around the power in existence with what it is that I'm creating and what it actually
Yeah.
is and what it does. And I like that about me, really. I just create it, I'm just like, okay.
Also, even in this realm where we talk about the craziest things to the average person, I love a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah, I've always been hard-headed, and the angels kind of joke about it sometimes.
Yep.
Because I was kind of like, all right, you want me to do that? Prove it. Because
Uh-huh.
they've always had to prove things to me because I wasn't just going to go off willy-nilly to do something necessarily. So I've always received a great deal of proof.
Yeah.
Confirmation, right?
I have to say, the other day I was when we got back from that trip, I never get sick and I was under the weather and I was just like, okay, I'm adjusting to some energies or something. And so I went upstairs and I have a really accepting husband and I march upstairs to go take a bath. Then I come downstairs and he's like watching me and I walk by and I go, I forgot my Lemurian healing rod. And then he just like laughs and shakes his head. And then we're both kind of like cracking up because it's hilarious and it is just what it is. And I went and meditated with it. And I feel like we have to, in this process, find humor because why not?
Oh yeah. And the angels say they don't laugh at me because they don't really laugh. They never laugh at anyone. But they have like this energy, a rumbling, humorous
Uh-huh.
energy sometimes that I'm kind of, you're laughing at me. We do not
It's
laugh.
it's with you, Phyllis.
Yeah, so I think they roll their eyes too.
Their angel eyes. All right. So, I mean, I could ask you questions for days, but I think it's probably time to wind it down. So, I am going to ask you this one last thing. I see you as a very advanced energy worker, but I'm curious, what is something that you want to learn or get better at?
Does it have to be about spirituality?
Absolutely not.
What I have found for myself that I am working on it, being, about listening to my own body. Because I've been doing a lot of stuff and kind of riding along, and I've had some health issues where my body was like, we're done. I'm done.
Yeah.
Whatever. And I'm like, what? What's going on? So I am really in that mode about being in my physical body now because many years I just wasn't, right?
Yeah.
Really, really rooted or grounded. And the realization that came to me was like, okay, my focus, like this whole summer, the last several months, is really on shoring up my physical foundation. like this construct. Because without this physical body, then I can't do the work that I'm here to do. So I have been really working towards that, because the challenge with really embodying these energies that you're working with is that you need to have the body solidly rooted in order to embody it. And so I've always been the one to like build the, like if I were a tower, I would be building the top floors before I actually shored up the foundation. That's the way my life has always been.
Yeah.
Whereas the last several years, it's big turnarounds, like, okay, you're the Leaning Tower of Pisa. So we need to shore up your foundation. And so that's the physical aspect. So it's really the understanding that we have to have all of our aspects, all of our constructs, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and energetic, in full alignment. And so I realized that in my full embodiment, my physical aspect was a little misaligned, let's put it that way. And so I've really been working on that. So I guess I would have to say listening to my physical body, right?
Yeah.
And just listening overall, because I think we really cannot allow our lives to spiritually unfold, to flow, if we do not listen. Because when we sit back and listen, we can truly hear the words of, we'll just say, the God force spoken as and through us. We can really hear our higher guidance, our soul self, right?
Yeah.
And that's not separate from us. So it is initially, it never is, but we feel that it is initially. And then as you begin to embody that in the work, it starts to like shift in to this physical vehicle. The angel showed me the physical body as like a chalice, like a wine goblet or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cup was kind of like from high heart up, right? It would fill. And then the physical body is the stem, and then the feet is like the base of the chalice. And that's where we root. We root through the base of the chalice. And so what they gave me was, okay, light, you're going to fill the chalice with light. And light comes down and it has a compressive force. And as it compresses, everything that's not in alignment with that light, that higher aspect of self, comes to the surface, rises up, we become aware of it, and we have to release it, surrender it, let it go, because it's not in alignment.
Cool. That's beautiful. Okay. I mean, like I said, I could keep asking you questions for days, but I think we have to turn this thing off. That was amazing. I'm so excited to share all of your wisdom.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for
It's wonderful talking with you.
Yeah, so fun. Thank you, Phyllis. Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as we did. Be sure to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss a new episode. If you liked today's episode, please consider leaving a review to help the other psychics find their way here.